Today's guest is David Suich. The man has spoken to over 1,200 people who have been declared clinically dead and come back. We're talking about near-death experiences. This subject is out of this world. You got to keep an open mind with all this stuff, but if you have never really delved deep into this subject, David has done it for you, and the things that people have brought back from the other world is absolutely insane. With all of that data, you can start to piece together a picture that is showing a composite of what is really going on with the nature of reality, what potentially is happening to us when we die, and what this means for us all here on Earth right now. Some of you guys aren't leaving that review. We have not been getting the reviews on iTunes and Spotify. I know all you guys are watching this on YouTube. Check out our Rumble. Please, for the love of God, leave us a comment on that iTunes and on that Spotify. And we, my friends, will see you guys later. Enjoy the podcast.
The Way of Will John.
After a 12-year learning experience in which David learned the testimonies of over 700 people who died in various ways, were revived, told their stories of what they saw on the other side. Most went to heaven, some went to hell, but all of their experiences were incredible, shocking, and life-changing. I no longer have faith in God because that implies a belief in something unknown or unproven. I now know as a basic fact of life that God and heaven exist. That is a very good way to kick off this podcast. David, how you doing? What's going on?
Hi, Will. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a wonderful day here in East Texas where I live, and it's always a joy to talk about my favorite subject. At the time I wrote my book, I had heard around 700 testimonies. I've heard around 1,200 now. And that's just what you quoted from the book is the way I feel. I talk about that kind of stuff like the weather. Of course, I have learned to keep things to myself for people who maybe are religious or aren't comfortable hearing about this testimony. Certainly on a channel like this where people are open-minded and interested in this subject, it's wonderful. But one learns to keep the stuff to oneself because it's just so strange and out there.
It is, but it's also something that needs to be, I mean, the taboo that is around it is starting to weaken and kind of dissipate in a certain sense with the internet and the fact that some people that are more into it and people that are having experiences are getting to connect. And then there's people like you going out there and trying to do this. So let's start from the beginning as far as we can call it any sort of beginning, and give us an understanding of what you're studying and why you're studying it and what's happening. And then we'll go from there.
Well, I started studying back in, I think it was around 2007. I had worsening chronic pain for 8 years. It actually got so bad at one point, it was tendonitis throughout my body, that I was in a mobility scooter. If I had to go to the grocery store, I couldn't be on my feet for 20 minutes because it hurt too badly. And I got very depressed. And it was during that time when I was doubting if God existed, because I had been prayed for by at least a dozen churches, several hundred people over the years, and nothing. And so I thought, either there is no God or more likely he's there, but I'm not a good Christian, because back then I was a Christian. I thought I'm the son that God's embarrassed of. And I clicked on a random YouTube video about an atheist who died, found himself in sort of a hellish afterlife, and called out to heaven for help and was rescued. And that's what got me started. And of course, back in 2007, YouTube was fairly new. It was hard to find testimonies about near-death experiences. And now there's more channels than I can keep track of with thousands and thousands of testimonies. And I like what you said. The taboo is definitely changing. It's becoming more commonplace. If you said my higher self or my chakras 50 years ago when I was a child, people would look at you like you're crazy. And even as late as 1972, one testimony I heard where the woman died in the hospital giving birth in 1972, she had a near-death experience, and when she came back and was revived, she told her doctor the whole thing. 3 weeks in mandatory psychiatric evaluation. 100 years ago, if you talked about your NDE, you got put in a mental institution. They weren't very pleasant back then. And today, it's so common. You see it in Hollywood. Don't go towards the light, Jim. Stay with us. They joke around about it. So it's because of the internet communication, these experiences that people have been having for thousands of years are becoming commonplace. And so it's kind of exciting now. And it won't be another, 50 or 100 years before kind of all of humanity is aware that we're just in these bodies temporarily having this human experience, and we're spiritual beings that are all connected. So it's an exciting time to be alive. It really is.
Totally. I think the one of the most interesting things about it is, yes, it's hard, and we live in a world that is steeped within materialism and the materialist worldview. And because of that, it makes it hard for people, like you said, to make that switch or be open about it, even with the taboo dissipating, like I said. So I think for some of the people who are going to be curious, and this is going to be new to them, what is this body of evidence that we've been collecting, anecdotal or not? There are these testimonies. What are they saying? What's happening? And maybe we should explain what an NDE perfectly is as well.
All right, let's briefly go over what the near-death experience is. Now, the term near-death experience was coined by Raymond Moody with the first popular book regarding the subject that came out in 1975. I read that book in 1979 when I was 14. Back then I was a Christian, so I kind of put it aside. And some people don't like that term near-death experience because they say, well, I died. So we need to make a distinction between death where it's temporary and where it's permanent. So many people in their out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, they see this silver cord coming from their midsection connecting to their physical body on earth. And so their light body is connected to their spiritual body. If that cord breaks, you're not going back. So from the spiritual definition of death, it's near death. So the common near-death experience, and they're all different because heaven will give you an experience that you need. And so they're all tailored to make the person feel comfortable and that kind of thing. If your grandmother died and you really loved your grandmother, she's probably going to be there to meet you. Or if you're a big fan of nature, they'll bring you to one of heaven's beautiful parks or gardens. Or, one guy was a big fan of the Apostle Peter, and he got met by Peter, who he said was a bit shaggy looking. He probably appeared the way he did on earth. So the typical near-death experience, a person dies, they in an accident or in the hospital or some kind of reason. There's all sorts of ways people died in the testimonies I've heard, stabbings and shootings and, lightning strikes and car accidents and heart attacks and surgeries gone wrong and all sorts of things. And they see themselves from above, and sometimes they go through the tunnel and they get told it's not your time, go back, or sometimes they're just above their body and they go back in. Now, people will ask them, were you like a ghost? No, I was the opposite of a ghost. They say, I was more real and more alive than I've ever felt in my life. The height of existence, just filled up with life. So, when you're dreaming, you think the dream world is real. It's only when you wake up that you realize that that dream world was disjointed and not very real and solid. And if you can imagine taking one more huge step to a higher level of consciousness, that's what these near-death experiences are like. Now, some people go all the way into the light, and they don't have to be told that this light is God. It's like the universe reverberates his name. And they describe a love that's so powerful it can't be described in human words. The closest thing we have to it in our language is love, but that's completely inadequate to describe it. They say things like, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life. Put them all into one moment. You don't come close to what it feels like to be there. Or think of the strongest love you've ever felt and multiply it by 500 or 1,000, and that's what it feels like. So it's a wonderful feeling of unconditional love, of connectedness, of peace, joy, purposefulness, that everything that happens, including these lives down here, has a purpose. They describe remembering this perfect, elegantly beautiful, simple plan of creation. How could I have forgotten this? There's a feeling of familiarity. Oh, yes, this is where I came from. There's a huge belief in our worldwide culture of the afterlife. I think it's something like 60 or 70% believe in the afterlife. It's a smaller percentage, less than half, that believe in a pre-life. But the reality is, just as we as human beings like experiencing a different reality by going and watching a good movie or reading a good book, and you get into it and you kind of experience this different reality, souls enjoy leaving the comfort and joy and peace of heaven to come down and have a human experience. And it's more than just having a human experience. Probably the biggest shocker of all this stuff that I've learned over the years is what we're doing down here, which is still hard for me to wrap my little human brain around. But apparently we are a critical part of the engine of growth of creation by coming down here and having a choice between love and fear, and then making the choice of love by experiencing duality. We are, and this is just a metaphor, we are holding the space for the love of heaven to exist. So if it weren't for the work we're doing, all that beauty and love and perfection of heaven would not be. You know, we're a critical part of the engine of growth of the fractal of God, is the best way I can put it. So we have an important job down here, even though it's difficult.
So, okay. And so this is essentially the, I mean, God, my brain, I've got to reel it in with all of the places I want to go with this. Let's go with, so what you're giving us is a composite, let's say, of a lot of the testimonies of the people
Yes.
who are going or have had these experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned them going to this place with the light.
Mm-hmm.
The people who don't go to the light, that have these poor and bad experiences, are we to contribute that to the standard contemporary view of hell as we would see it with fire and brimstone? And why do those people go there? Is it still based with unconditional love that you're being sent here to be taught don't do or don't go down this route in order to go there? Or is there some other force at play?
Well, sure, you know, God loves us unconditionally with a love that can't be described, but if you break one of his rules, he's going to burn you in hell forever. And that's what religion taught us, right? I mean, that was one of the big shockers that, oh, wait a minute, that's not true. You mean no matter what I do down here, I'm loved and I'm going to go home? Yes. You know, we don't punish you. The mind of God is not the mind of a human being. It is pure light, love, and compassion. It does not have anger or judgment or even expectation. It only loves. And so people do have negative experiences. And I don't really believe in the terms heaven and hell the way our worldwide culture understands those terms. In my opinion, there are only countless realms of various vibrations and densities. And of course, we would call the more pleasant ones heaven and the lower vibrational, higher density realms hell. But it's not a judgment, it's not a sentence. So in the afterlife, thoughts are things, as they are here, but it's a slow process. You know, if you think something enough, you tend to manifest it here. But it's a slow, long, drawn-out process, and much of the time it requires physical action. You know, if I want to drink this water, I can't just imagine it. I first have to imagine it, and then it requires physical action. Well, in the afterlife, it's instantaneous. So, you know, you imagine an apple in your hand, and an apple appears, and you can eat it. And so whatever you can imagine or think gets created. So some people who die, who are in a negative or fearful state, they will be in these dark voids, and they set up these sort of empty spaces, like a construct called a quantum field. And then whatever your consciousness can imagine or create comes to be. So these people literally, or collectively, if they're with other souls, like-minded souls, will create a sort of hellish environment. It's not a sentence. They're not stuck there. They can leave there when they want. There is a spiritual benefit to experiencing a partial or complete separation from God or Source. And it's going to feel hellish, but there's a point to it. And if there wasn't a benefit to that partial or complete separation, which feels very fearful and very hellish, it wouldn't exist in the perfect plan of creation. So most of the testimonies, about 95, maybe 97%, were positive, about 3% were hellish, and there were quite a few where the experience was hellish. You know, the person died, they're in this darkness, they don't know what's going on, they're scared, they start freaking out, and it becomes very negative, the worst experience of their life. And then they finally give up, and they say, well, I must be dead, there's nothing I can do about it. And as soon as they calm down and relax, the experience becomes heavenly. And then sometimes they'll go towards the light and connect and all that. So I hope that clears it up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. You know, and it's funny because having these conversations with we've had a few now on this podcast, and it's painting a picture that is very similar. This impersonal God, the fact that manifestation as we know it here on Earth takes a while, barring, I would say, some sort of, let's say, Michael Jordan-esque training, desire, and ability, the monk that stays out there forever, 50 years, and works on his mind, you know, and can potentially do something that we cannot, running around with our phones, etc. And so with that in mind, are there, apart from the NDE experience where these people, like you said, getting struck by lightning, heart attacks in the hospital, childbirth, etc., are people experiencing the same level of connection with this, let's say, afterlife, other world, other dimension, without dying? Is that possible, capable? Are people, you know, because we have OBEs, we have people with lucid dreaming. Is there a very big difference from those? And if so, what?
Yeah, every experience is different. Lucid dreaming is a different experience than out-of-body experience and NDE, but people have had quote-unquote near-death experiences with all the common elements: soul coming out of their body, seeing themselves from above, feeling light and free and energetic and young again and no pain, without dying or without any kind of medical emergency. I think 3 of the 1,200 plus testimonies I've heard over the years were people who had no medical condition for them leaving their body. And one guy, he had a horrible argument with his wife, and he kind of sat down and was in this meditative state in a chair, and he said to God, you know, why is life so difficult here on earth? And his soul left his body, and he had a full near-death experience. But that's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. Down here, we're kind of the expert souls. We are considered sort of the daredevil souls and are considered the brave ones to those in heaven, because Earth is the hardest planet to incarnate into in this entire galaxy, which is full of life. You can have many different lifetimes here in this galaxy. It's one of the 3 hardest in the entire universe. And so we're considered very brave souls, you know, and we're doing some tough work.
So you just mentioned one of the 3 hardest places to incarnate. Where else? And how does that work? A soul, or let's say energy, even if you want to put it like that, is in the other world and decides this would be a good place for me to learn, and then they just shoot off, and that have tons, thousands, millions, I don't know how many lifetimes they have, and then they shoot back with that knowledge and that understanding. Or could you give me some sort of, you know, worldview? How is that piecing together?
Well, okay, a brand new soul, the first time they're going to incarnate into a physical life, they don't come down to earth. You know, you don't send a child who just learned how to walk on a trek up Mount Everest. It takes years of preparation and a huge support network and years of experience to do something like climb Mount Everest. And Earth is, of course, the Mount Everest of physical incarnations. I mean, if you're here listening to this podcast here on Will's channel, you are an expert soul already. You've done this many, many times. You've had lifetimes, not just many here on Earth, but on other planets. So when a brand new soul starts out, they will incarnate on a planet where they're already living in peaceful utopian societies. And then they'll take on tougher and tougher planets until they're, you know, ready to take on Earth. And of course, there's some pre-soul planning that happens, and you get together with some older or more experienced souls. There's no age in the afterlife, so, you know, there's no time in the afterlife, but older, for lack of a better term. And they will kind of help you choose enough challenges so that you learn and grow and participate and make a meaningful contribution to the creation process, but not so many challenges that you're going to fail. So we are never given challenges that we are incapable of overcoming. And so you will plan out the major elements, and you come down to Earth, and you experience all the good and bad and ugly that is here. And lots of it's great and lots of it's horrible. You know, you separate from the eternal source. You don't feel the love anymore. You don't hear the music. You don't have the connection. You don't even remember your family. I mean, and then you're in these frail bodies that get injured, and you go through all sorts of emotional and physical and mental and spiritual trauma. You know, some people go through lifetimes of trauma. And we also have some good experiences. And then you get back to the other side, and you look back on your earthly life, and you say something like, wow, that was an awful, miserable experience, but it was also beautiful and wonderful at parts. And, you know, after a long, long break, I got to do that again. You know, and that's what we do. We're experts at transforming planets into utopian paradises.
And you say that after, you know, a long, long time. And time is this funny thing. And I always tend to ask guests studying this thing about time, because our relationship with time here, from what I gather, is different than the time experience in another dimension, another world, or in what would be the afterlife. What is the, because also with these people who are having NDEs, what's the time difference? Like, they could be gone. I've read some testimonials from people who have had experiences where they feel like they've lived full lives in the dream world or in the other world and come back, and it was like a second, 10 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, they were out, you know? And so how does that get understood?
Well, I'm going to switch the terms around a little bit. This is the dream world that we're living in now. And people who die and they leave their bodies go, oh, okay, I'm back in the real world now. So, yeah, the one common element, whether the experience is heavenly or hellish, is that there's no time there. Now, from our human perspective, that's almost impossible to conceive. So what they'll say things like, here on Earth, we have what's happening right now, and then what happened yesterday, and then what's going to happen tomorrow. But up there in heaven, it's all the same. And some people describe it as instantly being aware of eternity, or living in the eternal now, or something like that. And, you know, you can be dead 30 seconds a minute. The first near-death experience I ever heard, the guy was dead for only 1 minute. And he had a long question and answer period. He asked several thousand questions to these 7 or 8 spiritual beings that he was with the whole time. And he said, had that occurred on Earth, it would have taken longer than his college degree. And this guy had a PhD. And some people say their near-death experience was longer than their life was up till that point, and they're dead 10, 20 seconds. So it's not something I fully understand, but yes, there's no time in heaven. And time is an illusion that's created in the third density environment that we find ourselves in.
You also mentioned some rules, right? Or that there potentially are some. I mean, is there a rule? Because I also enjoy the wonderful discussion on whether something is inherently good or inherently bad, and what that really means for us as humans in how we choose our actions and our morality. So what are these rules that we do have? And especially if the God is impersonal, if we align ourselves with certain rules and stuff like this, that's better for us, correct? Or how is that done?
Well, rules are kind of different in the human mind than they are in the spiritual world. So there are, just like there are laws of physics, there are rules of spirituality. But the creative, benevolent source of everything in existence that we're all a part of doesn't have sort of a set of rules of, you know, you can and cannot do these things. You know, you can do anything you want, even disconnect completely from the source. You know, you can say, well, I'm not going to be with my family anymore. I'm going to go live by myself. Well, that generally doesn't work out too well. But yeah, there are spiritual rules. There are rules of energy. So there are quantum, measurable, multidimensional energies that our science is just now kind of learning about. So electromagnetism and gravity are multidimensional quantum energies. And we're going to discover a few more, and we're going to learn how to measure these things. And when we do, we'll understand God a little better, and we'll understand our common connection. So yeah, there are certainly rules, but there are no rules of behavior here on Earth. We're down here to experience duality, which means sometimes we're going to choose to act out of love, and sometimes we're going to choose to act out of fear. And a lot of light workers or spiritual people or gurus or that kind of thing, they tend to shun the darkness. They tend to push away any sort of behavior that's based on fear, selfishness, greed, and manipulation, cruelty, and all that. And really, you've got to dabble in both. We came down here to experience duality. So certainly when you get good at it, there's less of the dark behavior you need to learn your lessons, but that's what we came here for. So there's really no bad decisions. There's really no inherent definition of good or evil. Those are just human concepts. There only is what is.
Sure.
And people have been told that. I remember one guy in his near-death experience, he's going through his life reviews. So they'll take you through a life review up there, and they'll kind of show you what you did and how it affected others. And at one point, he's saving this woman's life. And he says, wow, so this was a good thing that I did. And God said to him, well, in the grand scheme of things, it was neither good nor bad. It was just a lesson to be learned. And another time he stole, back in the days where we had, Coca-Cola and sodas coming in glass bottles that would get recycled and they'd fill them up again. And you could take them back and get a little a return fee, and then you could buy something with it, And he stole his empty bottles out of his neighbor's garage to go buy some candy. And he says, God, oh, that was bad. God says, well, it was neither good nor bad. It was a lesson for the learning. So heaven has a different perspective on things than we do. But just having the choice between love and fear, it helps the creation process. So it's from heaven's perspective, whether it's good or bad, it's all good.
It's something that is right controversial for the majority of Earth, who feels as if we were to all learn and know this, that it would be complete anarchy. And I don't think that is the case. I don't know the answer to whether or not if humans are inherently good or bad, but it does seem that we understand that cooperation, at the very least, is a better thing. Otherwise it would be chaos if we all acted and pulled on every urge at any time. There are these things that you understand. If I just see a guy with a nice shirt and I say, I want that shirt, and he's way bigger than me, we understand what's going to happen, or what he's going to do and use his tools available to him to make sure that I don't just take the shirt. And we live in a place where I think it somehow it works out. I mean, whether this supercomputer, all-knowing being, understanding, has some sort of greater perspective, which is clearly the case, it makes it interesting on morality. So I always find that interesting. And taking a massive turn to somewhere else, in the current zeitgeist, you spoke about how things have changed in 50 years. What about the fact that now I can say alien, 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 UFO, UFO, alien, 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 as much as I want now, and no one's going to think that I'm crazy at all. So how, or if, I've never seen this, is there anything in the NDE repertoire discussing aliens as far as, entities that are not from here, even like within a physical, on some other planet light years away? I know that at least from my understanding, it doesn't have to work like that, right? They could be dimensional. There's all sorts of stuff that could be happening. Is there any discussion of aliens within any of these testimonies at all?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, when people are up there, often
Really?
before they get sent back or choose to come back, whatever the case may be, they will ask questions. And some, as I mentioned, the one guy asked thousands of questions. And one of the common questions is, are we alone in the universe? Now, it's almost a funny question to ask because, God's not that inefficient. The universe is really big. If you were traveling the speed of light, that's 7 times around the Earth in 1 second. That's a fast speed. So if you're traveling at the tremendous fast speed of light, to cross the pinpoint of light that we call the Milky Way galaxy, it's just a little pinpoint of light in the universe, a little dot in the sky, our entire galaxy, you would have to travel at that tremendous speed of light 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your whole life, and then do it for 1,200 lifetimes. So the answer to that question is yes, the universe is full of life, and there are countless other dimensions containing countless numbers of universes that are also full of life. And this galaxy that we're in now, most of the life is humanoid. There are some variations. So there are feline and reptilian and aquatic and avian and all sorts of variations, but many of them look like us. and our galactic parents, who are kind of watching over us, just like when a child grows up, then they have their own children and watch over them. When a civilization grows up and they stop fighting each other and learn to live with each other in peace and harmony and learn to live with the environment, peace and harmony, their job becomes to be a good parent and to help the seeding life on another planet. So the Pleiadians are our cosmic parents. The Arcturians are our grandparents, the cosmic parents of the Pleiadians. And if you saw a Pleiadian, you would think they were Nordic or, German or something like that. They're kind of fair-skinned, blonde-haired. And so a lot of them look like us, and then there's some variations. And so, yeah, even our galaxy is full of life.
What about the idea of them being here, right? Our galaxy is full of life, but a lot of people are going to have a hard time believing that they're here on Earth or walking amongst us. What of that? And is there any reason why that couldn't be the case, or that
they're here
it to be the case? Because
okay,
they're here in
walking
what
among
capacity,
us,
though. Like,
what's that?
But like walking among us, you say that they're walking among us,
sure,
which is going to be which is a crazy idea to me. In the idea, so do they look like us? Are we not able to detect them? Do they have some sort of technology that is so far advanced from us that I could have spoken to an alien this morning at the post office, and they're just like, yeah, no, it's cool. How does that work?
Well, some of them, like the Pleiadians, look like us, so they can come here without any kind of disguise. And there are others that can use technology, or they can use their biology, so they can sort of make you think you're talking to a human when you're not. It's like a suggestion, sort of, like a next level hypnosis almost. But there's not too many of those. The Pleiadians, they don't like coming down here because all of our negative emotions out of fear, we're kind of barbaric still. And to them, all that negativity is like a foul smell would be to you or I. So they tend to just have their craft here, which are camouflaged. They're well camouflaged. I mean, you go online, you can type in YouTube military camouflage. You'll see some pretty amazing camouflage right now. And we're darn primitive. We've only had a couple hundred years of technology. The Pleiadians have had over 1 million years of technology. So they camouflage their spaceships. If you see a Pleiadian spaceship, it's because they wanted you to see it. So what they're going to do, they're not going to show up right now and introduce themselves. We're too barbaric. If you moved into a new neighborhood and the neighbors all said, you see that guy across the street over there? He spends half of his money on military gear and guns and all these weapons and stuff. And if you knock on his door, he's not going to open the door pointing a gun in your face, but he's going to have his hand on his gun at his side ready to go because he doesn't trust you. Well, I just described the U.S. government, didn't I? Half of the money they spend on military, and if the spaceship landed on the White House lawn, would they be met with handshakes and flowers and hugs, or would there be a military response? Yeah, we're not ready yet. So what they're going to do is they're going to start turning off their camouflage. They don't want to just show up. That's going to cause a panic. It's going to cause a crash in economic markets. They're just not going to do that. So they're going to turn off their camouflage over the years, and then when everybody has seen this flying saucers, everybody's photographed them, videotaped them, years and years we've been seeing these things. We know they're here. They're obviously not here to hurt us. They'd have done it already. Then they'll make an appearance once we're kind of aware of them. And they do that to avoid a panic. And we may have some other species show up before then, maybe the Greys or something like that. But they avoid us generally the same reason if you were out, you're an archaeologist or whatever, or, you're studying primitive tribes and you run across a tribe of violent cannibals who kill outsiders. You're not going to go up and introduce yourself. You're going to study them from a distance. So that's kind of where we are now. It's probably going to be before 2050 when they show up.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So it won't be too long. But lots of people have met them. Lots of people have communication with them. There's some that are here doing research or work or here for various reasons. Yeah.
Now, this communication that you go across, I mean, how is this done communicating? I mean, most of the UFO lore will have telepathy and spoken word, this being kind of like the dumbed down way of communicating. So how is their communication. And I think we should even touch on like this. You said Pleiadian, and you said some other something I had never heard before. What was the other?
Arcturian.
Nocturian?
Arcturian. Mm-hmm.
Octurian. Okay. Number one, okay, their ships. Do we have any understanding of their science? Are we
A little bit.
Are we okay? And then the other communication. So people are having communication with these entities, beings, aliens, whatever. How? What? Through what medium are they having communication?
Well, they don't communicate through radio signals like we do. That's just way too slow. So that's limited to light speed, which is too slow. So Albert Einstein described something he called spooky action at a distance. And when you take a quantum particle that's spinning in one direction, if it's quantumly entangled with another particle, doesn't matter how far apart they are, if you change the spin on one, the other particle instantaneously changes. So they use this, mind-to-mind communication. So what they do, because you've got to be on the same frequencies to communicate, you get a little walkie-talkie or a CB radio, and if you're not on the same frequency, you're not going to hear each other. And so we're lower vibration beings. We're in a very lower, very dense reality, and they're in higher vibration reality. So a Pleiadian or an Arcturian, for example, will lower their frequency, their vibration. The human being will raise their frequency and vibration. And when they match, they will be able to communicate. And then the alien communicating will use the knowledge and experience and cultural information to communicate in the words of that person. So in other words, there's things from other cultures, like in Spanish, I'm married to a Mexican woman. They have something called a quinceañera, which is the celebration of a girl becoming a woman. It's a 15th birthday. There's no direct translation for that. There's no word for the quinceañera in English. You have to understand the culture. And so the best way to communicate is to connect mind to mind. And now the alien is connected to the mind of the human. And when they have to convey an idea, they use the terminology and the cultural understanding of the human being to convey that idea. And our way of communication is linear. It's word for word. It's very slow. They communicate in bulk. Like the internet, I send you a file. I can send you the Bible. A PDF of the Bible is fairly small. I can send it to you in a couple seconds. One block of data, bang. Well, it would take you months to read it. And so they kind of have to slow down for us. But yeah, it's this mind-to-mind communication. It's called channeling. And there's lots of Pleiadian channelers out there, and Arcturian channelers, and Syrian channelers. And some of my favorite channelers are Bashar and Cryon and Tobias, and there's lots of them. But we're in communication.
So this, am I to take it also as well, though, that we have this ability? Is this a latent ability that we have? I mean, most people are aware of the cities from India, from, I guess you could say, ancient India, or even some say even before what we now know as India, are these latent powers that we have. And I had a discussion with Dr. Stephen Greer about meditation, about certain things that are possible and available to humans. Have you found that is the case, that even though this is how they communicate, we also have this ability? However, it's steeped in the fact that we all can't concentrate for more than 2 seconds because of the way that we live our lives with TV, phones, whatever else. Everything is a distraction in the modern day world. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, I joke around like I'm mildly to moderately psychic. I mean, I've got some friends that are mediums that are really psychic. And sometimes I'll say things like, oh, so-and-so is thinking about you, call them. And they call, oh, well, yes, they were thinking about me. Or, I'm seeing that this is going to happen. And then it happens. They go, how did you know that? And I say, well, it's because I'm psychic, just like everyone else. Everybody has the ability, just like riding a bike. Everybody can be taught to do it. And it's just a matter of learning it. And everybody, every human being, on a daily basis, uses their psychic abilities. They're just not aware of it. And you'll hear it. I used to watch this show called You Shouldn't Be Alive. And these people are in these survival situations. And they'll say things like, and then I got a feeling like I should just go over here and do this. And it's what saved them. Like, you got a feeling? That was a pretty specific, feeling from nothing. It's because they're psychic. And we heard about this on 9/11. This is a true story. Very successful businessman who, is reliable. He works in this office building, very important job. And one day he forgets to do what he learned to do when he was a child working a minimum wage job, which is to set your alarm and get up on time. And he forgets to set his alarm. And he's really upset. He's 2 hours late for work. And he flips on the radio, my office building has been destroyed. Well, that wasn't an accident. He knew subconsciously, don't set your alarm or you're going to die. So he didn't set his alarm. It's happening all the time. Or you'll hear about it when you ask how a couple meets. Oh, I felt like I should go up to that woman and introduce myself. It's like, well, that didn't come from nothing. You planned in your pre-soul planning to have a partnership with that person. And so they're always following their psychic abilities. And yes, people can learn to channel. Now, right now, it takes a special kind of practice and training and ability because it's a steep learning curve for many human beings. We're not good at raising our frequencies. I have briefly channeled, and it was uncomfortable for me. It was almost like sitting there and your mouth is an autopilot. Now, some people say it's control. Well, it's not control. When a man is dancing with a woman and the man is leading, you don't say the man's controlling the woman. Anytime the woman wants, she can stop and push herself away. But she is deciding, I am letting this person move my body the way it's going to be moved so that the dance can continue. And if you're going to allow this communication to happen, you have to let your body, on autopilot. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. When I did it, was very uncomfortable. Just not physically, but just from a mentally, like, I'm speaking these words, and not only are they not mine, but when you finish, if you're new at channeling, you don't know what you said, and you got to ask the person. Well, that's kind of an uncomfortable thing for a lot of human beings. So most of us aren't ready for that. But we are going to develop to a point, the future of communication is not this thing. Because in the future, and I've heard about it from NDEs, we're going to be psychic. We're going to have relationships and friendships with intelligent beings on other planets, just talking to them mind to mind. Imagine a world where we say, hey, Will, should we invite them over for dinner? Should we invite Mary and Joe over for dinner? Well, let's ask them what they're doing. Yeah, they said they're coming. We're going to have that world.
So I then have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, what would someone do to enhance any sort of form of psychic ability? And the second question is, as you mentioned, that technology or our phones aren't going to be the way of communication for the future if we are to take this route. What do you make of the attempts to use technology right now, like Elon Musk's Neuralink, which seeks to, essentially plug us up to the internet, plug us up to other people? Is that also just a way of circumventing our own ability, or is it making us dumb because we're kind of not using what we have within us? So those two things, fascinate me.
We're not mature enough to use the tools of technology we have today. So often a society's technology will exceed their spiritual maturity, and it'll eventually reach a cap. If you're limited in your consciousness, you will be limited in the technology you can develop, because if you go too far with technology and you're not mature, you're going to hurt yourself or blow up the planet. We're going to have clean energy someday. We're going to have 0-point energy, a little box that sits in your house and runs for 100 years with no maintenance and produces clean energy. We're not ready for it yet. Too easily weaponized. And so things like AI, we're just immature. And artificial intelligence will always reflect the spiritual maturity of the society that created it. Well, we're pretty dang primitive right now. Okay, we're like 2-year-olds in the sandbox who are just learning to not fight each other and just learning to cooperate. And you don't put a knife in the hand of a 2-year-old. It's a very useful tool. You put a knife in the hands of a master chef and he makes a wonderful meal and feeds it to the homeless. You put the knife in the hands of a master woodworker and he'll make a beautiful carving or make tools out of that, using that knife. But you put a knife in the hand of a child and he might cut himself with it or stab somebody else with it. So we're just not ready for these things that are coming along. So there's a lot of problems in our world with technology being misused. Social media, it's being used to manipulate people. When you get these free services from Google, people think, well, they're paying for it with advertising. No, you're the product. Google is selling the ability to manipulate public opinion or manipulate human beings. And that's what social media and technology is being used for manipulation. It's also being used for the beautiful expression of God that is inside of every human being, and that is the pure love of creation. That's the core of every human being, regardless of how badly they might be acting out in the moment. And it's being used for channels like this to spread a message of love and kindness and peace and compassion and to talk about the beautiful future that's coming instead of the horrible future of humanity that you would think is happening when you listen to the news, that it's all going to hell and we're going to kill ourselves. So we're not ready yet, but the technology is being used for good things by the light workers and by the spiritual people and by high consciousness religious people. And we'll learn to use AI properly. We'll learn to use technology properly. That's coming.
Okay.
We're just immature.
Right. Well, which would make sense. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense, right? I mean, it does. On a global level, when you do look at us and you zoom out, and it's just like, how do we have this war, that war, this fighting, this stuff, and all this stuff? Because none of the people really want it. And so it's also getting to my... I want to come back, though, actually, before I go. What would you do to enhance your abilities? Or what would you do to maybe be more in alignment with maybe not necessarily just psychic abilities? Because I know a lot of the traditions push against wanting to have necessarily spiritual powers because they say that's not the goal, right? The goal isn't for you to be able to, I don't know, levitate something or be telepathic or anything like this. It's to deepen your connection, to enlightenment, right? Enlightenment in a certain sense, they claim to be the goal. But how would one be on the path, or what does these NDEs, do they come back with any sort of like, hey, you should probably, I don't know, a big one that's probably controversial, like, should you stop eating meat? And should you meditate every morning for an hour or whatever? Or is there anything like that?
Well, certainly, if you meditate on a regular basis, you're going to become more in touch with your innate, and you're going to become it's becoming more aware of your psychic abilities. And when you become more aware of it, you can use them better. And so I would say living your life with love, that's a big one, especially being loving and kind and generous to people who our egos tell us do not deserve it. Somebody's wronged me or somebody's really betrayed me or whatever. Well, how do I respond? Sometimes the most loving thing I can do is distance myself from that person. If I can respond with love to that person who's treating me badly, that's huge. I mean, there's few things that are more important to heaven than that. And as you live your life with love, you'll become more aware of your innate, your psychic abilities, your connection to the divine. You're basically raising your frequency and vibration. So certainly eating a good diet helps your thoughts and words, making sure you keep your thoughts and words positive. One of the things I heard early on is, people would come back from their near-death experiences and say, oh, if I knew how powerful my thoughts and words are, what they showed me in heaven, I'd have paid much more attention to the things I say and think. Like one of the examples I give is you'll hear people say, I am just sick and tired of it. Don't say you're sick and tired. Say you've had enough of that. Don't say things like that. People are very negative with themselves, and low vibration will shut down psychic abilities, or fear will shut down psychic abilities. and the way we talk to ourselves. Most people aren't even aware of how we talk to ourselves. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're single person, and you meet somebody online, and you decide to meet together in a coffee shop and have coffee. So you have this first little short date, and you're in the coffee shop, and you're talking to this person, and you think they're attractive and intelligent and a good conversationalist, and they got a great sense of humor, and you're thinking, hey, wow, this could be a possibility. This might be my life partner. And after 5 minutes, the person says, you know what? I don't think we're compatible. I think I'm going to go. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry it didn't work out. And they leave. And so what the person does is they go home, and they're upset. So they call their best friend, and they say, this person left. Why would they do that? And the best friend says, of course they left. You're not very attractive. You don't have much of a career. You're not very intelligent. Why would anybody like you and want to hang around with you? Only it's not the best friend saying that. That's what we're telling ourselves in our mind. And we do that a lot. We're very negative with ourselves. So to be positive with yourself, that really raises your vibration. Not eating meat. When a culture and society advances enough, they're going to stop eating meat. But right now, we need to take the first step. And the first step with that is the animals can't be sentenced to a miserable life because it's more convenient and more cost effective. They have to be treated with love. Any animals we use as food sources have to be given good lives. You can't have a little veal calf in a tiny little cage his whole life, or have 1,000 chickens all scrunched together in the tiny little building. They've got to have a good life. So I would just say living in the moment, not being afraid, giving up your fears, forgiving, focusing on meaningful relationships, service to humanity, positive thoughts and words, meditation. All those things are going to raise your vibration and psychic abilities.
Fear and anxiety is a big one,
Mm-hmm.
because that has gone up like crazy over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. And due to people comparing themselves to other people through social media, the access of now even, and I think I said this somewhere else, but that, like I for instance, I'm not a particularly good drawer, and that's me being generous. I'm a horrendous. I can't draw anything, right? That's not my talent.
But you're good with a soccer ball.
By no means do I believe that yes, exactly. Right now there, I'm fine. But by no means do I believe that I couldn't learn how to draw better. I've not taken any of the time, so I wouldn't. But however, if I were to take a drawing and I wanted to draw this picture right now of both of us right here and put it on the internet, there would be about 50, whatever. There's more than 50, but at least 50 people would say this is the worst picture I've ever seen. That's awful. You should never do this again. This is ridiculous. Did you think you were Leonardo da Vinci? All this stuff we can get now, right? And whereas before I could draw my picture, I could hang it up on my wall, and I don't know. Let's say mom comes by, sister, friends come by. That's not bad. That's okay, And so you were shielded from that, and I can understand why fear and anxiety has gone so rampant, because people who want to share themselves and not smother their light might put something out that they're a little fearful in the first place. They put it out. The first person to come to comment, that's not that good. They're gonna recede it back into their wall. So. The people that come back or that have fear when they go into these NDEs, and then they come back understanding that fear and anxiety is maybe blocking them from doing whatever it is that they're in their life. How do they get over it? Or what do they use? What sort of tools or understandings or processes do they use?
Oh, well, when you have a near-death experience, you're in this place of very high vibration, and the environment affects you. It instantly raises your vibration. And just like an old movie projector that takes the little image on the film and projects it onto the big screen, our spirits project onto the physical bodies and project onto the consciousness of our lives. And so they come back from heaven with special abilities. They're far more psychic. And so it's a natural thing for them. I recall one guy who died in a dentist chair. He took Vicodin for a back injury and forgot that he took Vicodin because it makes you forgetful. And he took it again. And then he went to the dentist and they put him under, and it killed him. And he came back, and he's in the grocery store. And he sees this woman. And he gets this vision of a diamond wedding ring in this dusty, dark place with this grating and light shining through. And he thinks that looks like a wedding ring underneath a refrigerator or something. So he walks up to this woman, really nervous, and tells her, what he sees. And she doesn't say anything to him. And she takes out her cell phone and calls the daughter and said, "Sweetie, check under the refrigerator." And then, a couple seconds later, just tears of joy. And she says to my friend, my mother died recently and we lost her wedding ring. And I was so upset with myself. I don't know who you are, or how you knew that, but thank you. And we all have this ability. And it's just a matter of developing it. And people are becoming more and more psychic as time goes on. They're becoming more and more aware of each other and the common connection we have. And it's, people think it's wonderful. It's not all fun and games. I talk with my spiritual guides on a regular basis, and it is not all fun and games. I mean, I've got an outdoor shower here. I live on top of a mountain in the middle of the woods. There's nobody to see me, so we have this nice outdoor shower, and I shower outside every day of my life, even in the winter. Well, we get wasps around here where I live. And, I'll be out in the garden, and sometimes they'll come around, but they won't bother me too much. Well, I'm standing out in the shower. This was a couple weeks back, and they're coming at me when I'm my most vulnerable. I got no clothes on. They can sting me anywhere. And I'm getting mad.
Yeah.
And I stepped on one. It's like, why the heck are they bothering me? I'm naked in the shower. They weren't bothering me when I was out in the yard today. Why are they bothering me now?
Right.
And another one came in, and I stepped on it. I killed another one. And I got real mad, and I said out loud, why the heck are these things bothering me? And my guide spoke to me, and they said, well, why do you think they're coming in the shower? I said, I don't know. Well, where are they in the shower? Like, on the floor by my feet where I might step on one and get bit. And they said, and why do you think they're on the floor of the shower? I'm like, I don't know. Well, what's going on right now in Texas? Oh, there's a drought. All the creeks and streams have dried up. Yeah, they were thirsty. They were desperate. So they wanted to drink the used bathwater you were throwing away, and you killed them for that. And there's a rule in nature that if I'm not threatening you, you don't attack. It's a guideline. It's not always followed, but it's a general rule. And they know you're big and powerful and you could kill them, but they knew that, okay, well, I'm not going to attack the human. I'm just going to get some of this water, and I killed them. It's not all pleasant. I felt awful, So some of it's wonderful, but some of it's not. And then I get flashes about people. Yeah. And I remember one time I'll get on I'm a spiritual counselor, so I counsel people who have near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences or spiritual awakenings. And I'll get on these counseling sessions, and a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times I get help. I get all this psychic stuff coming about what's going on in their lives. And some of it's, really good psychic stuff. And then I get off the session and I look at the stock market, and I don't know what stocks are going up tomorrow or what tomorr's lottery number is going to be. And I got real upset one day. I'm like, hey, how about some of this psychic stuff for me? Why can't I? And my guides very clearly told me it's to help other people. So it's wonderful. Sometimes we all have the ability. I would say just, if you want psychic abilities, there's some good books out there on how to develop it. But for me, the two biggest signs are if I get told something that surprises me or confuses me and I have to ask for clarification. And it's generally the first thing that comes into your mind. Once you're thinking, it's too late. It's that first instinct is your psychic vibe, your connection to the divine.
That's really cool. I mean, I've also been fascinated with the intuition, or your ability to know things when you shouldn't know them, right? And it does seem that when you try and push your intellect into it too much, you kind of mess up the signal, for lack of a better term. You mess something up by letting your brain mull around with every sort of thing that it wants to lay on top of it, rather than just kind of you being this calm water effect that that a picture or something can just get placed on, and you can just accept, okay. Because when you do try to push your intellect on it, you already get these preconceived notions for how the answer should be, what I would be, and then you're just trying to solve it. Then you're trying to use your basic intellect, and you're not letting yourself utilize these maybe greater powers that you have. I'm curious, you told a couple of these stories. Do you have a couple favorite stories out of these NDEs? Do you have?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've listened to a lot. Yeah. What sticks out as some of your favorite? I'd love to hear.
Okay, there's a couple. The very first one I clicked on, and I don't believe it is a coincidence. One of the things they say, these NDEs, they come back and they were told or shown in heaven, there are no coincidences. So I don't think it was a coincidence I clicked on this testimony. The very first one, the guy was an atheist. He didn't believe in any of this stuff. And he's being brought towards heaven, and he sees this beautiful, pure place. And he realizes, I really screwed up in life. I thought there was no God, and here I was just living for myself and kind of being this mean tyrant. There's one in every big group, right? In every company or every political arena, slamming their fist, yelling, intimidating others. He was one of those guys. And so he's going towards this pure place of love and beauty. He thinks, they've made a mistake. They don't want me up there. I'm garbage, filth, scum. I don't belong there. And they stopped. And they said to him, we don't make mistakes. You belong in heaven with us. And that was so special to me because at the time I thought, God doesn't want me. I'm a screw up. And it's like, oh, no. You're a beautiful soul doing your job down there, and you're helping creation process. And we love you, and we honor you, and we adore you. And so that was real special to me, that very first testimony. And then I really liked Kathy Jordan's testimony, Birth Called Death. She died of a high fever, I think, when she was about 7 or 8 years old. Her brother, who had died in the Vietnam War at age, I want to say 17, came to get her and took her to heaven. And then he came many more times without her being in the high fever and dying. And they had many trips to heaven. And she wrote a book about it called Birth Called Death. It was one of my favorite stories. And it's just a lot of stories about heaven and the beauty of it and what they do there. And how it's the most fun, interesting, fascinating, amazing, joyful, exciting, peaceful place you can imagine. Everybody who's there, even for 1 second, wants to stay there forever, but somebody's got to do the hard work to keep the creation process going, and that's what we're doing right here at the moment.
Speaking of hard work, you mentioned earlier the social media's ability to manipulate others or manipulate human perception, right? And one of the more interesting things to ponder is those with this knowledge, right? Because, assuming someone out there in, let's say, a position of power, whether that's politics or the deep state or someone behind the scenes or et cetera, has this certain knowledge, is it that there is an oppression going on? Is there a suppression of this knowledge actually happening here? Are there other beings, entities, things involved in not letting this come out as a widespread thing because of how we are, right? As you said, you don't want to give a knife to a 2-year-old, right? That makes perfect sense. And if everybody woke up tomorrow with psychic abilities, like God only knows what people would be levitating buildings and throwing stuff all over the place. So how is this working with the current hierarchical structure of human society right now?
Well, I don't like to talk about conspiracy theories and all that because I don't think it helps to focus on that kind of thing. It doesn't help bring world peace. But I honestly do believe, from everything I understand, everything I heard from heaven and everything I've heard here, there's a group of very powerful, wealthy families, about 2,500 so families, globalists, and they want to move the world in one direction where they are like the pharaohs of old, like, almost like gods, and the rest of us are the stupid minions that have to be controlled, just like a shepherd herding the sheep. They feel that they're superior, and they're actually the opposite. They're low vibration. So you mentioned earlier that people don't want war. Yes, I have heard that from heaven. For the first time in a long time in history, the bulk of the people are against war. We want peace, and the leaders are trying to drag us into old consciousness. To answer your question, it is my firm belief that there are a great deal of spiritual knowledge and technology that they are keeping hidden, that they're keeping for themselves. We're not worthy. The humans don't deserve this. We're the only ones smart enough to deal with this. Or we're keeping it to ourselves because we want to have the power over them. It's probably both. And so, there's a lot of hidden technology, a lot of hidden spiritual knowledge that they're just not sharing. So, for instance, I'll give you an example of this. Why would the globalist put in Hollywood movies and, remember the Georgia Guidestones that were recently blown up, that were there for several decades, that talked about the globalist plan. We're going to reduce the world population. We're going to have a one world government, one world court. Why would they put their plan out there knowing how distasteful it is to the population? Well, the reason is because they don't want the karma. We told you what we were doing to you. You're not victims. You're willing participants, which is true. From heaven's perspective, there are no victims. Certainly there are victims from our earthly perspective, but every soul, before they come down here, they know the potentials. They know all the things that could happen. And so they do that so that the karma is not on them. Oh, yeah. And then it's in plain sight. They'll talk about what they're doing. And they're losing. They are losing control and losing power. And the more they lose control, the more brazen they're going to get trying to gain control. And the human population wants to move in one direction and they want to take it to another. And they're going to lose. And they're going to get dragged up to a higher consciousness, just like the rest of the planet is. Everybody's consciousness is going to get raised. And it's going to be just like me when I was a little child, the first time my mom tried to put a spoonful of chocolate pudding into my mouth. Because I looked at it, and from the way it looked, I knew exactly what it looked like. It looked like not too well-formed excrement, you know? And so here I am screaming and crying, no, I don't want it. She shoves it in my mouth, and oh my God, I want some more of that, you know? And that's how it's going to be with these globalists. No, I have to be in control. I have to control my fellow human being. I have to be the king and the god. And no, don't take it away. Oh, I'm part of a community and I can contribute out of love and it feels so good. That's going to happen. It's going to take a while, but their consciousness will be raised with the rest of us. And as you see the chaos around, I mean, the most important thing when you see all this chaos is just realize it's part of the change. You know, when you got to bulldoze your old house because it's just falling apart and can't be patched up, if you don't know what's coming, if you don't know there's going to be this new, better, modern house built that we're going to all like a lot better, you're going to think it's the end of the world. And so we got all these wars and conflict and division. Well, consciousness learns and grows through contrast. What do you think's happening right now? Contrast, you know, has the United States ever been so divided? Has the politics ever been so divisive and dysfunctional? We're learning contrast. We're getting a bad taste in our mouth for being separated and the cutthroat competition. And we're eventually going to say, we've had enough of this. We're going to start cooperating. And that world's coming.
Mm. Was there ever a society in the past that actually got it right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's always the idea of Atlantis will go thrown out there, ancient Egypt, you know. Was there a society on Earth that got this down and nailed it?
Oh, boy. I'm hesitant to talk about these things because it's just so crazy, but I'll leave it up to you if you want to keep this part in there.
I don't think that it is. I honestly don't think that it is crazy at this point now. And this actually kind of reminds me of Darius, who where we were discussing. I think we were discussing flat Earth or potentially something in that realm, and he did the same pause like you, like, oh God, I've got to tell him. And it's always the same. But I really, honest to God, do not think the people who are curious about this, because we have along there, and we've been going for a little over an hour and 10, something like this. There are people that are watching this who did not expect to be at this point of the podcast. And they are going to now go use the internet, and they're going to go dig this up, and they're going to go watch every single one of your other interviews, you know, and they're going to go try and cross-reference this stuff. And I think it's so good for you guys to be completely free, because at this point they've already agreed they want to hear, you know. And so that was the same point I had with Darius. We're going to do something else in December again. I already know that you have to come back on at a certain point too, because the topic is so broad, it's impossible to cover everything in an hour. But yeah, anyway, I would love to actually hear what you actually think about that.
Okay, so probably the best source, I'm going to say, if people are interested in this stuff, are the direct channelers, or people like Kryon, Kryon, channeled by Lee Carroll, who talks about the Lemurians and the Atlanteans and all that. But there's lots of, you know, Seth channeled about this stuff. And so there's lots of good information from channels, but I'll tell you basically what I know. There have been many different civilizations here. We only have evidence of the ones where something physical survived, like the Sumerians. So, 12,000-year-old culture, and, we've got some of their writings that were carved in stone. Well, for the older ones, there's no evidence left. But, there's civilizations that were 50, 60,000 years old that had technologies we don't. The Atlanteans, for instance, had technology to manipulate DNA, and they were making animal-human hybrids that they were using as slaves and sex workers and that kind of thing. And the Lemurians had cold chemistry technology that helped renew their biology. And the Egyptians had technologies that we don't have. Certainly in terms of the modern electronics, nobody had stuff like this. We're really good with electronics and that kind of technology. But there were many technologies that ancient civilizations had that we didn't, and they were many that were higher consciousness, although we are very close to coming to the highest consciousness the planet's ever had and exceeding that, and that's going to happen shortly. The dance of consciousness is always one of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So yeah, we take steps back. Atlantis was an amazing civilization, and because of some things that happened, their consciousness lowered and they were destroyed. And so, it doesn't take much of a brain to look around at the world today and tell that we're in a step back, but it's part of the dance. If you're going to rock the car out of the mud, you got to let it go back. It's not all just going forward. And that's part of the fear-love duality.
That's a
Dip
great
into
point.
fear, jump back into love. Dip into fear a little more, jump back even higher into love. That's how it works. We learn through contrast.
And you've alluded to maybe at least 2 or 3 times throughout this that you feel as if we are going to transcend this point, that it's coming in this soon. And why? What gives you that level of confidence that we're close, right? To the most people, without understanding what you just said about having to rock back into fear and then push forward to love, people would just say, well, what's not to make us just go backwards and just slide right on down the cliff and we're back where we, back in chaos and stuff like this? What gives you that feeling of we're almost there?
Near-death experiencers talking about it, being shown the future, well-known channelers talking about it. Cryon, channeled by Lee Carroll, has spoken at the United Nations, channeling at the United Nations 7 times. Not before the General Council, but before members of the UN. No slouch, Spiritual
his name?
gurus talking about it. Ancient writings predicting it. The Mayan calendar, 2012. Remember that? December 21st, 2012, the world's going to end. No. They were talking about the end of an era, the end of the barbaric era. This era, especially before 2012 that we're in now, in the future will be known as the barbaric time, the barbaric era. And so, yes, this is something we've all been working towards for thousands of years. Human beings watching this podcast right now have had probably several hundred lifetimes down here, and we're getting close to the grand finale. We're getting close to that new world of love that's coming. And we're probably about 50 years away from peace on earth. And that's going to be the first step, when we stop fighting each other. And once we start cooperating, then things are really going to get rolling. And about 150 years from now, it's going to be, compared to today, it's not going to be heaven, but compared to today, it's going to feel like heaven on earth. There's going to be these small societies, about 100 to 150 people that live in peace and harmony with the environment. We'll have high technology, but it'll be limited because we will discover that biology is the best technology. So yeah, we'll have AI and spaceships that travel to other planets and that kind of thing. But, when you look at it, it's going to be this garden paradise where human beings communicate even with plants to tell them where to grow. And if somebody gets sick, there's no doctors. The community comes around and through the power of consciousness and prayer heals that person. It's in us today. We have the ability, but we're like a pilot in an F-35 jet fighter that can go Mach 2 or 3 or whatever. I don't know how fast they are. And we're just taxiing down the runway, So it's coming. I mean, it's going to be such a change. Like, look back 150 years ago, this farming society with almost no technology compared to today. Really different, right? It's going to be that different. It's going to be so different, and I've said this on other podcasts, that if an alien were to look at the planet today, he would say, Yeah, you guys are going to kill yourselves. You're fighting each other. You're trashing the planet. You're all messed up. Your governments are all dysfunctional. You can't get along. Oh, yeah, you guys have had it. You're going to extinguish yourselves. You're a mess. And if he came back 150 years from now, his jaw drops. What did these humans do? How did they clean up oh my God, they made their place into a garden paradise. How did they do this so fast? And that's what's coming. And we just got to be patient, because you don't go from being 2 years old to, you don't go from being a 2-year-old to a 20-year-old overnight. It's a long process of maturing. And we'll get there. But the new world of love is coming. And don't worry, if you're watching this now, don't worry like you're going to miss it. You'll be back. This life's going to be over. You're going to come back in a different body, and you're going to be here for the grand finale. And then when we do that, then our job is going to be to seed life on another planet and help them and be the parents instead of the child. So, I mean, imagine a world where, this is just like the transition that I'm talking about, where politicians, it's not winner take all. It's not, okay, the two sides fight. Oh, now I'm in power. All right, we're doing it my way. No. The politicians are going to be the ones that have the highest integrity. The ones that get elected are going to have the highest integrity. They're going to be the best mediators, negotiators, moderators, saying, well, what do we all want? And a politician that gets elected, he will never say a negative word about an opponent. Oh, no, I like my opponent's ideas. Or, that's a well-intentioned idea, but here's why I don't think it's going to work. They will never insult. Companies are going to advertise based on integrity. They advertise now. The advertising is ridiculous, right? I mean, you got Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. They all say we have the nation's biggest 5G network. We're all 3 years saying that. One, two of you are lying. Well, in the future, they're going to advertise based on integrity, and it's going to be true advertising. Look how good we treat our employees, especially when one's having a problem. Look how much we care about the environment, and we're being careful to leave no trace, to not damage the environment. Look how good we are to our customers, and we don't gouge with our pricing, and we have really fair pricing. And when one has a problem with a product and service, how we take care of that. And it's going to be real. Today it's just awful, but that world is coming. We just got to relax. We got to be patient with the 2-year-olds fighting in the sandbox. So, yeah.
I hope. I really do hope. I mean, I have the sense that things are going to get better. I do believe that, in deep down. I truly do believe that we are more motivated also to work for peace. And it does seem like something, and it has happened within my short span of time here on Earth. Something changed. Something happened. It is starting to look different as far as the masses, right? Or the way that the masses, I mean, we are a bit more united, not in that globalist sense where it seems like the person in South America, while not being in Palestine or Israel right now, still wants there to be peace over there and kind of gets this. Something does seem different, right? And it's hard for me to articulate perfectly, but it does seem like that's the case. Listen, I could go down. I have a whole nother section that's going to go down on other stuff, but I think this will be a good spot for let's say, the beginner into the NDE world, into a ton of the topics that we've just touched on. Is there a place you want to send everyone to learn more about you, about your book, about what else is there? And we're obviously going to link to everything, but is there any place you want to send anyone that's interested in more?
Sure. If you want to contact me, my email address is at my website, godtookmyclothes.com. There's a link to my spiritual counseling services, and there's also a free preview download of the first couple chapters of my book, so you can see if it's the kind of book you want to read, before popping the money on it. There's also the full version in Spanish that you can download absolutely free, because it's considered a different book. Awesome. If it's a different language. And I haven't got it published in Spanish, so that's free. And of course, if you just want to send me an email, let's say you're on a budget, I don't have money to buy a book or hire a counselor. At the time of this recording, I am still answering all questions via email. And some people will send me, 30 emails. And I send voice recordings to respond. I can't keep up with the typing anymore, so I send a voice message to respond. And I've sent several hours of voice messages, just one person, and that service is absolutely free. So many people have shared their testimonies freely with me that I want to share this information as freely as I can with others. And of course, there are lots of wonderful videos on YouTube, spirituality and near-death experiences, and I would encourage people to watch those and learn from those as well.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's incredible what you're doing and the fact that you're delving into all of this. So thank you for taking the time. I would really, at another point, maybe before the end of the year, love to sit down again and maybe even get you on here with someone else who's studied the subject, maybe from a different angle, and we can discuss all the things that you guys have learned. So, David, appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
Well, thank you so much, Will, for having me on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation today.